So, breaking news reaching the decks of Penas can confirm the sudden death of Pope Francis. Now, I know that this will come as a great shock to a lot of people, considering the fact that today happened to be Easter Monday, the day that Christ rose from the death. Now, there are a whole lot of news going on as to what really happened, how it happened, because if you've been following the news about the Pope's health, you realize that just yesterday he met with Vice President J.D Vance, that's the United States of America's Vice President. And then they had a very cordial chat and talk, which stemmed from his rebuke against the Trump administration for their handling of immigration policies in their country. Now, apparently, all these while the Pope was not well, and the news which was coming from the Vatican up until their meeting yesterday indicated that the Pope was only recovering and then was doing or faring better. But then today, we were hit with a sad news. This is more like a reality, which went on to confirm that Pope Francis indeed have died, have passed on at the age of 88 years. Now, there are a whole lot of things that happen. Be taking you through the years, what really happened, what is next for the Catholic, what is next for the Vatican, and even how world leaders across the globe are currently reacting to the death of Pope Francis. People are grieving. In fact, currently, as I'm speaking to you now, if you go to Rome, there are a whole lot of people who have gathered at the Vatican and also various, centers that the Pope Francis used to have his events. So, first off, as I said, there are a whole lot of things that went on before the Pope's untimely passing. That is this morning, which was basically reported and even confirmed. Now, Pope Francis, if you're following the whole journey of Pope Francis, you realize that he is a man, and in fact, you realize that way back, in fact, the news even goes on to show that he was born on December 17th, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he was also the son of a migrant family who moved to Argentina from northern Italy. Now, he was also determined to be a man of science, so he trained as an industrial chemist before a chance encounter with an unknown priest set him on the path to priesthood. So, all this while, Pope Francis wanted to be a chemist, but then he met a priest one day on his way to work or whatever it is, and then the priest spoke to him, and then he realized that no, his life and path in this world is to work for Christ. So that ultimate encounter changed his destiny, leading him to become the Pope in the distant future. Now, prior to his ordination in 1969, he went out with girls, danced the tango, and even worked briefly for a nightclub. Worked briefly as a nightclub bouncer. In a 2010 biography, Bogiolio told authors Francisca Ambrogetti and Sergio Robin that I love tango and I used to dance when I was young. Of the female friend with whom he used to share his this love of tango, he added she was one of the group of friends I went dancing with, but then I discovered my religious vacation. So apparently, Pope is saying that he is not a saint, okay? He basically was the worldly type, the outgoing type, but then we realize that God has set a path for him in his life that later will change his destiny. Now, according to Bergoglio's, which is Pope Francis' experiences of Argentina's dirty war in the 1970s and 1980s, that war transformed him to be a conservative and ultimately leading him to become a bishop and a more compassionate priest. Now, he later became an archbishop in Buenos Aires in Argentina in 1998 and was appointed to the College of Cardinals by Pope John Paul in 2001. His eventual election as Pope was foreshadowed later that year when he stepped in as the general rapporteur of the synod of bishops that year when the Cardinal Edward Egan was called back to New York after 9/11 attacks. Argentine journalist and Pope Francis biographer Elizabetha Piquet told the National Catholic Reporter in 2021 that Bergoglio's role in the Synod of 2001 was very important and crucial for his later election. In fact, he worked so well as a relator, replacing Egan, that he started being known and noticed in Rome as someone palpable. From then on, he remained on the radar of many cardinals, not just progressives, looking for a successor for Pope John Paul II. So in 2005, the 2005 conclave to elect John Paul's successor is widely reported to have been a two-horse between Joseph Ratzinger, the man whom will soon become Benedict XVI, and Bergoglio, that's Pope Francis. A conclave diary purporting to have been written by an anonymous cardinal in the Italian media claimed Bergoglio received 40 votes on the third ballot just before Ratzinger crossed the two-thirds threshold and became the Pope. So all these while, it is evident that Pope Francis was eyeing for the throne, but then he was just patient. Now, following Benedict's resignation in 2013, Bergoglio was elected Pope. That is, Pope Francis was elected Pope on March 13, taking the papal name Francis in honor of Saint Francis of Assisi. He later revealed his inspiration for the name. Next to me was Archbishop Emeritus of Sao Paulo, also Prefect Emeritus of the Congregation of Clergy, Cardinal Claudio Jimenez, a great friend of a great friend, a great friend. When it got little dangerous, he comforted me, and when the votes went up to test, the usual applause came because Pope was elected. He hugged and kissed me and said, "Don't forget the poor," and that word entered here, the poor, the poor. Then immediately in relation to the poor, I thought of Francis of Assisi. Standing on the balcony of St. Peter's Square on the night of election, he told thousands of faithful gathered below and millions watching on live TV that the cardinals had gone to the ends of the earth for a new pope. So this was just basically a brief history of Pope Francis and how he became Pope Francis, and even his advocacy later in the life. Now, through his time as a pope, he's been more forward thinking and had a very open stance on LGBTQI plus issues, and compared to his predecessors who basically dismissed it. Francis made his famous comments on the subject a little more than 4 months after his election on a flight back from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, when a journalist asked him about gay praise. He said, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and his good will, the Pope said, "Who am I to judge?" So basically, this particular phrase will go on a long way to shape the Vatican, and saying that, in as much as we don't believe in the LGBTQI plus, who are we to judge? It was the first time a pontiff had ever made such a word gay in reference to sexuality. And then immediately after that, Pope Francis also described the criminalization of homosexuality as an injustice while traveling back to Rome from South Sudan capital Juba last year. People with homosexual tendencies are children of God and should be welcomed by the church, the Catholics said. To mark 10 years of Pope Francis heading up to church, Dr. Gregory Ryan from the Center of Catholic Studies at Durham University previously spoke about the Pope's legacy. He says several voices who are now voicefully exercising their right to criticize the Pope are the same people who in previous generation were trying to emphasize the role of Catholic clergy and Catholic bishops was to be in line, not in dissent of papal teaching. That's one of the things that turned around. That's that there was criticism of Benedict and John Paul II, but it tend to come from theologians, academics, and also activists. So what's unique here is that it was coming from the bishop. Now, today, as I'm saying, we are learning the sad passing of Pope Benedict, and this is just a brief, something about him, his life, his legacy, what he lived for, and ultimately he is gone, and then he will be remembered as a Catholic myself. This is very, very, very. This is a very sad news. But then ultimately, one of the things that we also need to really acknowledge is the fact that Pope actually lived a life. He was 88 years old. He lived more years than even the average 60 or 70 years that has been given to human beings. So, to all my fellow Roman Catholics and those in the Vatican, there's a very, very, very sad thing. Now, one of the things you also have to notice is that Pope Francis is a 266th Catholic Church leader. Yes, so he's just one of the many, but then he's left a very gracious legacy. Now, according to the Vatican, they are saying that today, that's the 21st of April 20 2025. At exactly 7:35 a.m. this morning, they are saying that the Bishop of Rome, Francis, returned to home of the Father. His entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and the church. He taught us, they taught us to live the values of gospel and faithfulness, courage, universal love, especially for the poorest and most marginalized. With immense gratitude for his example as a true discipline for the Lord Jesus, we commend the soul of Pope Francis to the infinite, merciful love of God, one and true and tribine. So basically, this is exactly what is really happening. Pope Francis is gone. And then what we also know leading up to his death is that he had some flu. So one of his lungs was even removed when he was a young man. One of his lungs was even removed, and definitely was hospitalized in Rome's Gemelli Hospital on February 14th this year with bronchitis, and that led to a double pneumonia and also several respiratory disease, which ultimately led to his death. He spent about 38 days. He spent about 38 days in the hospital leading up to his death, and this is something which is really really sad. We'll end here, and then we want to say may God rest the Pope's soul. Thank you so much for watching.